You might have heard about Terri Tchorzynski, who, if maybe you're just going about your usual business at the end of last year and all of a sudden realized we had a Counselor of the Year, that is to say, in the country, right here in Calhoun County. Terri is with the Calhoun Area Career Center, accepted that honor from President and Mrs. Obama not long ago, and she's here to talk about that with us today. Hi, Terri.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
My goodness, how did this happen?
Oh, man, it's just been a whirlwind. It's been a very quick process, but it's been amazing.
So let's talk about what your job is, first of all, as a counselor. What does that mean?
Okay, so as you said, I'm at the Calhoun Area Career Center, so we have juniors and seniors in our building. And really, I think the easiest way to explain my profession is just broken down in three aspects. So college career readiness, so we're preparing our students for what their plans are after high school. Yeah. And at the Career Center, I mean, that fits in very well, very easily. Academics, so again, making sure our students are successful, earning the credits that they need to graduate, behaving, attendance, that they're there on time, and then the social emotional part. So if they're dealing with crises at home or conflicts with other students or just depression, anxiety, we work in those realms. So those are kind of the three areas that we tend to work within with our students.
It's so interesting that you're here today because just yesterday, I went to high school out of state, and just yesterday, one of the guidance counselors, who was a guidance counselor when I was in school, went on to become the director of guidance in that area, and now she's a member of a school committee in the town where we were, and they're giving her a big award. And so I'm reading about this, and I'm thinking I'm going to see you today, too. It's just so interesting that all of these counselors are in my life all of a sudden. But she made a comment after having taught at a certain level and then became a counselor to high school kids. She said, she was quoted as saying, you've got to earn their trust when they're older. You probably understand what that means. Yeah.
Oh, relationships are so key. And when you think about what we talk with our students about, I mean, they're very personal issues, your dreams, your goals, things that maybe have been challenges throughout your life. And so if you don't have that trust with those students, if you don't earn the respect, if they don't find value that you really care for them, it's hard to break through to them. So very early, and when we, our start of our school year, that's exactly what we try to do, is just be present, earn their trust, get to have the students get to know us at a very early stage in the year so that we can develop that throughout the school year.
Terri Tchorzynski's here, Counselor of the Year in the country from the Calhoun Area Career Center. We'll go back to our original question in just a minute and find out how this all took off. That's in just a few minutes. .3 WBCK. Terri Tchorzynski is with the Calhoun Area Career Center, a counselor there, and ended up Counselor of the Year, and went to the White House to accept an award in that honor just, I say a few weeks ago, but it was probably several weeks ago now. But how did this all happen? So did you get nominated? How did this work? Yeah,
I would say a little less than a year ago, my principal, Tim Staffen, nominated me for Michigan School Counselor of the Year. Yeah. And that included quite an application process. And even at that time, I was just in awe and never thought that this would be something that I would be acknowledged as. So I submitted the application, and then I was chosen as Michigan School Counselor of the Year. From there was another process. I had to make a video that displayed me and our students and our building. And from there, I was chosen as the top 5 in the nation.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. And from there, it went on.
It went on to an interview process in Virginia with myself as well as the other 4 finalists. And then from there, I was chosen as the National School Counselor of the Year.
Which means you get to go to the White House and accept an award.
From Mrs. Obama at that. And what was so amazing about that experience this year is that this was her final farewell.
Right.
So the School Counselor of the Year celebration was the same time her final farewell speech. And if you've heard that, it was all about education, and her passion completely shone through in that speech. And so it was just an amazing experience to be able to be there with her.
Right. That ended up being her final speech as First Lady, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so not only was it an opportunity to go out with a bang, but she tied it into the subject matter, didn't she?
Yeah. And so I am the 10th National School Counselor of the Year, but actually only the 3rd that's been recognized in the White House. So this was kind of, this was Mrs. Obama's initiative. She wanted to put school counseling on the map in regards to some of her initiatives, like Better Make Room and Reach Higher. And so it was kind of like a great final ending with all of this, at going back to the White House and hearing her remarks in regards to school counselors and what we do.
What did she say to you?
She, I'll never forget this because I met her personally before we went and, we had our speeches. And I thanked her for everything that she's done for education. And right back at me, she said, no, thank you for everything you've done for your students. And she says, I've been reading about you and I've read about your work. And I think my heart stopped at that time thinking, oh, wow, that's amazing.
It is interesting that when you meet someone who has so much on their plate that they say they know about you.
Yeah, it was a little overwhelming. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it gives you a little pause, doesn't it? So what is it like today trying to navigate young people to the right choices when we hear about so many challenges in education?
They're definitely the challenges, but also on the other side of that is just the exciting part of it, So in working with juniors and seniors, we tell them all the time that the world is open to you. And, there's so many opportunities out there in regards to what you can do, and especially here at the Career Center, we like to emphasize the path that's right for that student. So it may not always be a 4-year university. It might be a 2-year school or a tech trade school,
right.
And so there are boundless opportunities for these students. We just got to get them there, and overcome some of those barriers that maybe come with education and just personal life in general. There are a lot of obstacles, and you talked about trust earlier. That's a big piece of it. Just not only me as a counselor, but just having trusting adults in their corner, helping them through this and navigate through this process.
And some of them may not have a abundance of those.
Right. Right. And that, so as a school counselor, I try to be as proactive as possible, identifying those students early so that I can help them, because sometimes those students that don't have a lot of supports, they're not looking for them. They maybe lack trust in adults, or they haven't had those experiences. And so they really are reserved. And so it really takes somebody to kind of be a little bit proactive to pull them out of that and say, hey, you can trust me that I'm here to help you.
Right. It is interesting. I worked several years in Kalamazoo right at the time when the promise was ramping up. Mm-hmm. And the Kalamazoo Public Schools pivoted to a district now where money was not the issue anymore as far as college readiness is concerned. And so their superintendent had to refocus on what their real focus should be now. And his point, I think, has been since then readiness for college. They talk about it when they're kindergartners now. Mm-hmm. And realizing within that the distractions to learning that a lot of them have when they're not in school, and it affects how they perform in school. This is part of your job, isn't it? That you get to go and try and undo some of that.
Yeah, exactly. And, when you think about the school setting and you talk about state-mandated tests and graduation rates, it's so heavily on academics. And academics are important for college success, for sure. But there are other pieces to that are just as important, maturity-wise, responsibility-wise. We talk a lot about soft skills, the perseverance, the grit, the integrity. Those are skills that are going to help these students persevere through college. Mm-hmm. And so those are just as important as the academic piece. And that's, again, as a counselor, was what we try to build in our students, that prepare them for, yes, the academic piece that they're about to face, but also all the other characteristics that are going to have to come with that to help with their success.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting. We talked just this week about a program at First Wesleyan Church where they help people who haven't been able to get a job to learn what some of those soft skills are. So sometimes people get all the way into adulthood without that.
And we at the Career Center, we work with a lot of business and industry partners, and a lot of what our partners are saying is that, skill-wise, they can teach that. It's the other things, the soft skills that we're mentioning right now that are really kind of difficult to teach, the problem solving, the communication, the being there every single day. And so in my mind, that's the stuff that gets you to keep the job. Those are things that are going to make you employable and actually have you work up the chain to be successful.
Incredible. Terri Tchorzynski was the Counselor of the Year, so recognized at the White House recently, right here from the Calhoun Area Career Center. And we'll pick up where we leave off in just a moment on 95.3 WBCK. WBCK. A few more minutes with Terri Tchorzynski, Counselor of the Year in the United States. I can't say that enough. That's pretty darn cool.
Yeah, you keep saying that. That's great.
Calhoun Area Career Center is where Terri works. How has counseling changed? I mean, I was talking about my counselor from before. Mm-hmm. We used to call it guidance. You'd go to the guidance department. Yeah. They don't call it that anymore, do they?
No, I'm going to say that word kind of makes us cringe a little bit. It's transformed a lot, and so when you think back to 30 or 40 years ago in the role of a guidance counselor, maybe somebody that, working on some college readiness stuff, maybe some working on some college applications, and not many people knew what was going on. It was a very mysterious profession. A student would come in the office, work with the counselor, and then leave. I would say how it's transformed is we're much more proactive and visible. We use data all the time, and we share our data all the time. So when I'm working with students, maybe a lesson or a small workshop, I'm collecting data on why I'm there, what they've learned, and then I'm sharing that data with all of my colleagues. So everybody's very aware of my role as a school counselor. And there are still times that I'm in my office working. A lot of times I'm working one-on-one with students, but again, I'm sharing my calendar, I'm sharing our goals, I'm sharing our mission and purpose with everybody in our district, as well as our board and anybody else who's willing to listen. So they know exactly what I'm doing in our building.
That does sound vaguely familiar, going in and, well, yep, you haven't taken Algebra 2 yet. I want to do that, and where are you going to apply? And that was really the conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like counselors are in a role now to just be leaders in our building. When there's a planning committee going on about what new initiatives are going to be brought into the school, counselors should be involved in that because we're the student voice. So whenever there's a new decision happening at the Career Center, I want to be a part of those conversations so I can put that thought into everybody's head as to like how this can impact students, how this can best impact students.
So as you look at some of the students with whom you work, and some of them are probably bigger challenges than others, how do you work through it?
Patience is key, and I know that. We talked about trust earlier, and that's a big part of it. And so if I have a student that's really struggling, let's say missing a lot of school and just not very engaged at all, it's going to take a little bit of time for that student to maybe break through and have us develop, him or her develop some kind of trust in me so that I can help him or her. So I think being patient, being persistent, making sure that students know that you care, that you're there for the right reason, because students can see through all that stuff.
Right.
They're very smart.
Yeah. They feel as though if someone is disingenuous, they're going to know it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So that means you've got to get through that. And that is a bit sad because that means somebody has been disingenuous with them in the past.
Right. And that's, as a counselor, you can't take that personal because a lot of what they come with, that maybe their baggage or their challenges that they've faced, they don't not trust me because of me. They just don't trust me because of other reasons that they've experienced in their life. So it's my job, my goal, to try to figure out what that is and try to help them through that. So that way they don't have those barriers later on in life.
How do you see this changing?
What's that? In
5 years or 10 years, the job you do?
Like I said, I think I almost see right now as this point in time where it's the big shift for counselors, that we truly need to advocate for our profession and, like I said earlier, share with people of what we're capable of doing. So I really see counselors becoming more leaders in their building, being part of the administrative conversations that are happening. Because once a counselor can prove how he or she can impact the bottom line, AYP, graduation rate, state mandated tests, all those things that schools are being evaluated on, once people realize that counselors can actually have a positive impact with those things, we're going to be invited to those conversations. And then our role is going to look completely different in a school. What
goes through your mind when you hear stories like the challenges Battle Creek Public Schools are having now with keeping enrollment? Now we're talking about another budget deficit now, more cuts we presume that will come. When you hear about that, what comes to your mind first?
As an educator, it's discouraging, obviously. Always trying to, people go into education because they truly care for students. It's kind of like a passion that they have. And so when you hear these barriers that are just making it harder and harder to do your job and harder to impact your students, it is discouraging. But at the same token, I always like to try to keep a positive impact or a positive influence, right? And so I think as educators, despite the barriers that we're going to face, we're there for the students. Bottom line, that's why we're there, right? And so when you think about the budget cuts, that's hard, or not having the resources that you need to reach the students, but why are we there? We just figure out a way to get it done so that we can best impact our students. And that's got to be the important piece about all that.
And the ones that are there need you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. And so, there's a lot of other things going on, but the students are the most important thing. That's why we're in education.
And that sounds like a good place to leave it. Congratulations, Terri, on the honor. It's great to meet you, and maybe we'll check in again in 6 months or a year and see how things are going.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Terri Tchorzynski is the Counselor of the Year in the United States from the Calhoun County Career Center.